1962, America at the Edge. 1962 was not a loud year. It didn't announce itself with parades or declarations of war. It whispered. And then it scared the hell out of everyone. This was the year the Cold War stopped being abstract. This year, when ordinary Americans realized that annihilation wasn't some distant science fiction idea, it was a button, a submarine, a countdown measured in minutes. In 1962, children practiced duck and cover drills in school classrooms. Parents built fallout shelters in their basements. Newspapers printed survival diagrams next to baseball scores. And for 13 days in October, the entire planet lived inside the same anxious pause. But 1962 was more than missiles and fear. It was a year of transformation in music, culture, civil rights, space exploration, crime, and the quiet reshaping of American life. This is 1962, the year America started into nuclear abyss and somehow stepped back. The Cold War in 1962 was no longer theoretical. The United States and the Soviet Union were no longer testing each other at arm's length. They were maneuvering for position in real time, with real weapons in real places. The Soviet Union, under Nikita Khrushchev, was struggling to maintain the illusion of strategic superiority. The U.S. had more nuclear weapons, better delivery systems, and a growing global influence. Khrushchev needed leverage and found it at 90 miles from Florida. Meanwhile, China was recovering from the disastrous Great Leap Forward, and tensions between China and the Soviet Union were quietly fracturing the communist bloc. Europe remained divided by concrete and barbed wire, and Berlin was still a symbol of a world split in two. Across Africa and Asia, former colonies were gaining independence, often falling into proxy conflicts between East and West. The Cold War was global now and increasingly unstable. In October 1962, American reconnaissance planes discovered Soviet nuclear missile sites under construction in Cuba. This was not posturing. These were medium-range ballistic missiles capable of striking Washington, New York, Chicago with little warning and catastrophic results. President John F. Kennedy convened the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, ExComm, and for 13 days, the United States weighed options that ranged from diplomacy to invasion to nuclear war. A naval quarantine, carefully avoiding the word blockade, was imposed around Cuba. Soviet ships approached. Submarines lurked beneath the surface. One miscalculation could have triggered Armageddon. At one point, a Soviet submarine commander nearly launched a nuclear torpedo, believing the war had already begun. It was stopped by a single officer's refusal. Behind the scenes, Kennedy and Khrushchev exchanged letters, threats, and quiet concessions. The final deal removed Soviet missiles from Cuba and secretly American missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended, the world survived, but nothing felt safe anymore. John F. Kennedy in 1962 was tested in ways few presidents ever are. After the embarrassment of the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, Kennedy faced criticism at home and skepticism abroad. The Cuban Missile Crisis forced him to balance military advice urging airstrikes with terrifying reality of escalation. Kennedy chose restraint, not weakness, but control. His televised address to the nation was measured, direct, and unnervingly calm. He did not panic the public, even as he prepared for the worst behind the scenes. The outcome elevated Kennedy's stature globally and domestically. He had stared down nuclear war and avoided it. But the stress took its toll. Those close to him later noted that Kennedy aged years in those 13 days. While missiles dominated headlines, another battle played on American soil. In September 1962, James Meredith enrolled at the University of Mississippi, becoming the school's first black student. His admission was ordered by federal courts. Mississippi's governor openly resisted. Riots erupted. Federal marshals were attacked. 2 people were killed. President Kennedy sent thousands of federal troops to restore order. This was not a theoretical racism. This was violent resistance to equality broadcast to the world. 1962 exposed the moral contradiction at the heart of American. A nation claiming leadership of the free world while denying basic rights to its own citizen. Civil rights were no longer a regional issue. They were a national crisis, and that could not be postponed. Organized crime in 1962 was quieter than in the Prohibition era, but no less powerful. The federal government continued the slow, frustrating pursuit at mafia leadership. The FBI, long reluctant to acknowledge organized crime, was finally increasing surveillance and prosecution. Meanwhile, street crime in urban areas was beginning a gradual rise that would become more pronounced in the late 1960s. Crime in 1962 reflected a society in transition, traditional power structures weakening, new pressure emerging, and law enforcement struggling to adapt. If the Cold War threatened extinction, the space race offered hope. In February 1962, John Glenn orbited the Earth aboard Friendship 7, becoming the first American to do so. The flight was a triumph technologically, politically, and psychologically. Glenn's calm professionalism reassured Americans that they were not failing behind forever. The space program became a source of national pride, unity, and purpose. Space was not just exploration, it was strategy, prestige, and proof. 1962 marked a cultural pivot. Bob Dylan released his first album, signaling a new voice that would soon redefine American music. Folk music surged in popularity, reflecting political awareness and generational change. Motown continued to grow, bringing black artists into mainstream American living rooms. Rock and roll matured, teen culture solidified, music became identity, not just entertainment. America was finding new ways to speak and sing about itself. The American economy in 1962 was stable but cautious. Defense spending remained high, consumer confidence was solid, suburban growth continued, fueled by automobiles, television, and post-war optimism, tempered by nuclear anxiety. Middle-class life expanded, even as cracks began to show. Inequality, racial injustice, and generational divides. Americans were prosperous and uneasy. In Indiana and Ohio, life looked quieter than the headline suggested, but the Cold War was never far away. Manufacturing remained strong. Companies like General Electric, Eli Lilly, and regional industrial giants provided stable employment. Union jobs supported families and communities. College campuses felt the early stirrings of political activism. Civil rights debates reached Midwestern classrooms and churches. Professional sports, especially baseball and football, remained anchors of regional identity. The Midwest in 1962 was stable, patriotic, and increasingly aware that the world beyond its borders could change everything overnight. 1962 taught Americans a lesson it would never forget. Power must be controlled. The Cuban Missile Crisis proved that leadership was not about bravado, it was about restraint, communication, and understanding consequences. The year also proved that America could not ignore its own contradictions. Civil rights, cultural change, and global responsibilities were intertwined. 1962 did not solve these problems, but it made them unavoidable. Well, let's do the segment grades here. World affairs, got to give them an A. Presidency, with just on the Cuban crisis, I'd give JFK an A minus. Civil rights, with the federal government backing by sending troops to Mississippi, I give them a C plus. If they wouldn't have done it, I would give them an F. Crime and justice, C. They're just finally looking into organized crime, which was going on way before 1962. Culture and society, I think a strong B plus. Economy, B. And I'd say for 1962, an overall grade of A minus. When historians talk about the most dangerous year in human history, 1962 is always near the top of the list. Not because war happened, but because it almost did. America survived 1962, not through strength alone, but through judgment, through leaders willing to pause, through systems that just barely worked. The world moved forward, the Cold War continued, civil rights battles intensified, culture transformed, but after 1962, everyone understood something new. The future was fragile, and protecting it would require more than power. It would require wisdom. Next time we move into 1963, a year that would test the wisdom in ways no one could imagine. I want to thank everybody for listening. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And I will talk to you on the next podcast.